It all came crashing down the night she said goodbye. Well, not really goodbye, more like a casual dismissal handed to me because someone else decided I wasn't good enough for her. Her best friend, of all people, whispered that I wasn't in her league. That tiny sentence unraveled everything I thought we had. I'm 28 now, a guy raised in a modest, close-knit Midwestern town. This story has been sitting on my chest like a weight for years, and I think it's time to finally lay it all out. Let me take you back to where it all began, back in high school, where I met Amelia. She wasn't the center of attention kind of girl. In fact, she preferred quiet corners to crowded rooms. She didn't shout to be heard or crave the spotlight like many others in our grade, but when she did speak, it was like flipping a switch. Her eyes lit up with a fire that was hard to look away from, and her words tumbled out like an overflowing stream of vivid dreams and impossible plans. She talked about moving to a major city, working in publishing, and someday maybe writing the kind of books that would sit on the very shelves she helped curate. I was mesmerized. Back then, I was nothing spectacular. I wasn't the kind of guy who stood out in class or dominated the football field. I wasn't flunking school, but I didn't have a detailed roadmap for my life either. I was more of the hands-on type. If something broke in shop class, the teacher would call me over to fix it. If a neighbor's kitchen faucet wouldn't stop leaking, I'd be the one crawling under the sink with a toolbox. I took pride in being useful, even if it wasn't glamorous. By junior year, I started seeing the value in what I could do. While most of our classmates were tangled up in SAT prep and prom drama, I was laying the foundation for a small plumbing business. It was humble beginnings, just me, a van, and a few reliable tools, but it felt right. I had purpose, and that meant something. By senior year, Amelia and I were practically glued together. We slow danced at prom, giggled through cheesy rom-coms in my parents' basement, and talked for hours about the kind of life we wanted. It wasn't just puppy love. She was my first kiss, my first real girlfriend, and eventually, my first real heartbreak. But we'll get to that. Amelia eventually received her acceptance letter from a top-tier university, one of those institutions that practically guarantees success if you can survive the workload. She was elated, practically bouncing as she ran to my house to show me the letter. She waved it in the air like it was a golden ticket to the life she'd always dreamed of. I hugged her so tightly that for a second, I was afraid I might crush her. But she just laughed and held on tighter. That's the kind of person she was, always driven, always reaching higher. When she packed her bags and left for college, I didn't see it as the beginning of the end. I saw it as a new chapter for us. While she chased her dreams, I doubled down on my plumbing business. It wasn't glamorous, but it was growing. The money was steady, and I made it a point to help her however I could. Rent, books, groceries, whatever she needed, I had her covered. I even made surprise trips to her dorm during finals just to drop off her favorite snacks and give her a hug. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was committed. Still, cracks began to show. Amelia's schedule was packed with internships, late-night study sessions, and networking events. I understood her hustle. I admired it, even. But there were times when I'd call or text and I'd feel like a disruption. She'd hit me back with, "Sorry, I've just been so swamped," or promise to talk later, only for later to stretch into silence. Yet when I visited her, it was like nothing had changed. We'd walk hand in hand across campus, eat cheap takeout on her couch, and talk late into the night. Those weekends reminded me why I loved her. They made the long drives and quiet nights alone feel worth it. After graduation, she landed a job at a well-known publishing firm. It wasn't her dream gig, but it was her foot in the door. She was thrilled, and I was beyond proud. I thought we'd made it through the storm, that now, finally, we could start building something permanent. My business was booming. I'd hired a couple of guys, had enough work to consider opening a second location, and felt proud of what I'd built with my own two hands. It wasn't fancy. I didn't have an office with a skyline view or a designer suit. But it was real. It was mine. And she used to tease me by calling me the CEO of Pipes, and I'd laugh every time. For a while, things seemed good. I kept supporting her like I always had. If she needed anything, money, advice, food, I was there. If she had a rough week, I'd show up with her favorite Thai takeout. On weekends, we'd go on little trips, sometimes to nearby towns or scenic parks, or we'd just stay in and binge-watch whatever show we were obsessed with at the time. It wasn't a picture-perfect romance, but it felt real. It felt enough. But over time, the imbalance grew. Her job consumed more and more of her life. She wasn't just working hard, she was grinding herself down. It felt like she was constantly trying to prove herself, to her boss, to her colleagues, and maybe, deep down, to the world. I gently suggested she slow down, to take a breath now and then, but she'd shake her head and tell me I didn't understand. In publishing, she'd say, "You don't get to relax, you have to outwork everyone just to stay in the room." I wanted to be supportive, but the space between us kept widening, and even though I didn't realize it yet, we were slowly slipping towards something that couldn't be undone. There were nights when I'd lie awake, wondering what had changed. We were still technically together, but it felt like we were living in parallel worlds. Her texts became shorter, her calls less frequent, and the silences in between began to stretch longer and longer. I tried not to read into it. I told myself she was just busy, that this was what growing up looked like. We were both chasing something, and maybe, for now, we just had to be patient. But that patience wore thin, especially when her friends started entering the picture more and more. I didn't mind at first. Amelia needed a support system in the city, people who understood her industry. But it became obvious that some of them didn't see me as part of the picture. They'd make little comments when I visited, things like, "Oh, you still come all the way down here?" Or, "You must really have nothing going on if you can make that trip so often." The worst was her friend Dana. She was slick, polished, always dressed like she was about to walk into a Vogue shoot. I could tell from the start she didn't think much of me, and one night when Amelia and I were having a rare dinner with her friends, Dana leaned in and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "It's cute that you're still with him. Most girls would have moved on by now." I laughed it off. Amelia didn't. She stayed quiet, didn't defend me, didn't say anything at all. That was the moment I knew something had cracked between us. I didn't call her out, I didn't fight, I just filed it away and told myself I was overthinking. But I wasn't. I was watching the foundation of everything we'd built start to crumble under the weight of new pressures, new people, and unspoken truths. And it all led to that one night, the night she finally told me it was over. Even as things began to shift between us, I kept telling myself it was just a phase. Every relationship goes through difficult stretches, right? I believe that if we'd weathered the ups and downs since our teenage years, we could handle anything. We'd grown up together. She knew me better than anyone, so I convinced myself that whatever tension I felt was temporary, something that would eventually smooth out. But then Liz entered the picture and everything started unraveling faster than I could keep up. Liz was a colleague of Amelia's at the publishing house. At first, she seemed completely harmless. Amelia would bring her up now and then, slipping her name into casual conversation. "Liz thinks it's amazing how supportive you are," she'd say with a smile. Or, "Liz was saying how lucky I am that you drive all the way to bring me lunch during busy weeks." Back then it sounded innocent, like friendly workplace chatter, nothing more. But looking back, those early mentions were just the beginning. What I didn't know then was that Liz wasn't just commenting, she was calculating. It started off subtle, like someone throwing pebbles into a pond to test the ripples. Amelia told me once during lunch that Liz had said, "You're really fortunate your boyfriend supports you chasing your career. Most guys get insecure around women with ambition." Harmless on the surface, maybe even flattering. But then Amelia added something else. Liz had followed up by saying, "Guys like that, they're usually secretly controlling." I laughed when I heard it. I thought it was absurd. I'd never once made Amelia feel indebted to me. In fact, I went out of my way to make sure she had everything she needed so she could focus on her goals. I didn't care about splitting every bill or keeping score. But I could see the way that comment sat in her mind, like a splinter. She started doing little things, offering to pay for coffee, insisting on covering gas when we went on road trips. I didn't mind, but it was clear the dynamic was shifting. Then came the criticism. It didn't matter what I did. Liz always found a way to twist it. One afternoon, I dropped by Amelia's office with her favorite sushi from the little place down the street. She had told me she'd skipped lunch because of deadlines, so I wanted to surprise her. She texted me later to say thank you, but then added, "Liz said it was sweet, but also kind of weird that you didn't ask what I wanted first." That floored me. I brought the same order she always got, her usual combo, down to the extra pickled ginger and spicy mayo. Why would I need to ask? A few weeks later, we were out celebrating Amelia's promotion. I'd booked a reservation at this charming little Italian place she'd been dying to try. Everything was going well, laughs, drinks, heartfelt toasts, until Amelia mentioned offhand, "Liz said you should have let me choose the restaurant." She added, "She thinks you always take control of stuff like that." I was stunned. I chose the spot because it had been on her list for months. It wasn't about control, it was about paying attention to what made her happy. But it didn't stop there. Liz had plenty of opinions about my career too. One evening I was under the kitchen sink in Amelia's apartment fixing a clog. It was something I did without hesitation. I was a plumber after all. That's when Amelia brought up another comment. "Liz asked what you do," she said, sounding uncertain. When I told her you own a plumbing company, she said, "Oh, that's cute." Cute, that's the word she used. Like my business was some weekend hobby instead of the full-time, sweat and grit venture I'd built with my own hands. Hence, it didn't end with that jab. According to Amelia, Liz asked, "Do you think he ever regrets not doing something more polished like working in an office?" That one hit hard. I'd always taken pride in my work, dirty hands, callous palms and all. My job might not have come with board meetings or a company car, But it was honest. It was something I'd created from scratch. Still, Amelia brushed it off. "Don't take it personally," she said. "Liz is just blunt sometimes." But I could tell Liz's words had started to influence her. Amelia began making suggestions that felt out of the blue. "Have you ever thought about taking business classes?" she'd ask. To help expand your company? Or what if you started looking at partnerships? Maybe open a more upscale branch in the city. These weren't bad ideas on their own, but it was the way she asked them, like I wasn't enough as I was, like the man who supported her through school, who worked 16-hour days to keep everything afloat, wasn't quite good enough anymore. And Liz? She always found ways to insert herself into our lives, even when I wasn't there. Amelia told me about a company party where everyone was supposed to bring their partners. I couldn't go because I got an emergency call from one of my regular clients, an elderly couple whose basement was flooding. It was a serious job. I explained, and Amelia understood, or at least I thought she did. But when she told Liz why I wasn't there, her response was, "That's the problem with guys like him. Work always comes first." Later that week, Amelia brought it up again. "Do you think you'll always have to drop everything for calls like that?" she asked. "What happens if we have kids someday?" That conversation hit me like a brick. I was trying my best, but now, even doing my job, the thing that paid for so much of our life, was being painted as a character flaw. Liz's influence wasn't just in what she said, it was how she said it. She always came across like the wise friend, the voice of reason, and whenever Amelia and I hit a snag, Liz was right there with her unsolicited wisdom. If I forgot to text Amelia back during a hectic week, it was relentless. No matter how big or small, she found a way to twist it. One of the worst moments came when I helped Amelia move into her new place. I spent the entire weekend lifting heavy boxes, assembling furniture, fixing broken fixtures, even running out to get supplies. I was exhausted by Sunday night, but happy to help. Amelia was grateful, or at least she seemed to be. But later she said, "Liz thinks it's sweet you're so handy, but she also said it's kind of weird you didn't just hire movers. She says it's not worth hurting yourself over a few boxes." I was speechless. Who criticizes someone for helping the woman they love move? That's when I realized Liz wasn't just being opinionated, she was actively eroding our relationship. And the worst part, Amelia was starting to buy into it. She began questioning things she never used to. "Do you think we're too different?" she asked me one night. "Liz says relationships like ours only last for so long before people grow apart." And just like that, the seeds Liz had been planting took root and started to bloom into doubt. Throughout all the cracks that began forming in our relationship, I kept trying to be the glue. I'd remind Amelia of everything we had built over the years, everything we'd gone through together since high school. I believed that our bond was strong enough to survive anything. I truly did. I thought that if I just kept holding us together, it would all work out. I didn't see the full extent of what was happening, that someone from the outside was quietly working to pull us apart. Liz had embedded herself deep into Amelia's mind, one comment at a time. At the time, I didn't want to admit that a person could be so deliberately cruel. I wanted to give people the benefit of the doubt. But Liz, she wasn't just some opinionated coworker who liked to hear herself talk. She was something far more dangerous, a snake in the grass, a person who smiled while undermining me, who cloaked her sabotage in concern and friendly advice. And I didn't realize just how deep her poison had sunk until it was far too late to reverse the damage. It was supposed to be one of the best nights of my life. It spent weeks preparing, thinking through every detail. I had it all planned out. That evening was meant to mark the beginning of our forever. After nearly a decade together, through every high and low, I was finally ready to take the next step. I thought it would bring Amelia a sense of stability, reassurance after all the uncertainties she'd been wrestling with lately. I believed that showing her my unwavering commitment would be the answer she needed. I bought the ring a month in advance. It wasn't flashy in a conventional sense, but it was meaningful, personal. I had it custom made with both our birthstones set into the center in the shape of a heart. Tiny diamonds framed it. Cheesy? Maybe, but it was us. It captured our story, sentimental, playful, and built on memories. That night, I picked her up for dinner at a charming Italian restaurant she had mentioned months ago. I'd called ahead and reserved a quiet table tucked into a cozy corner, the kind of place that offered just the right mix of warmth and intimacy. I'd gone over my speech dozens of times in my head, what I would say, how I would kneel, how I would present the ring. I imagined her reaction, her joy. I imagined forever. She looked breathtaking that night. She wore an emerald green dress that matched her eyes, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. We started the evening talking about her work, my business, laughing softly like we used to, and for a moment, just a fleeting one, it felt like everything was still okay. But something was off. She seemed quieter, distant, like her mind was somewhere else. She kept glancing around, picking at her food. My gut twisted, but I pushed the feeling down. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing the velvet of the ring box, my pulse quickening. I was moments away from changing both our lives. Then she looked up and spoke. "I need to talk to you about something." Her voice was soft, but the weight behind it was enormous. I froze. My hand still gripped the box inside my pocket. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. She didn't look at me. Her gaze dropped to her plate. "I've been thinking a lot about us lately," she began, hesitating with every word, "and I think we need to take a break." My entire world screeched to a halt. "A break," I echoed, blinking. "What do you mean?" She finally met my eyes, and I saw the tears forming there. "I don't know if this is working anymore. It feels like we're drifting apart. I need space to figure things out." Her voice cracked. "Liska says we're mismatched, that I might be holding myself back." That name again. That voice in her ear that never shut up. I sat there, stunned, the box still in my hand. I pulled it out slowly and placed it on the table between us. I didn't open it, just held it there. "Do you see this?" I asked, quietly but clearly. Her eyes widened. She recognized the box immediately. "Is that—" she started. "Yes," I said, my voice tightening. "This is the ring I was going to give you tonight. I was going to ask you to marry me, Amelia. I wanted to spend my life with you, build a future together." She gasped, reaching a hand toward me, but I shook my head. "No," I said firmly. "Let me finish." I looked her in the eyes, refusing to look away. "I have stood by you through everything. I've supported you, believed in you, cheered you on while building a life that I thought we were sharing. And this is what I get in return? You blindside me with some vague break over dinner based on what your friend thinks? Thank God you showed me now." Before we went any further, she tried to speak, tears slipping down her cheeks, but I didn't give her the chance. I stood up, slipping the box back into my coat pocket. "You want a break?" I said. "Fine, but don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost." I turned and walked out of that restaurant without looking back. The drive home was a blur. Streetlights turned into streaks of gold and white as my thoughts spun like a hurricane. Every memory flashed before me. Every late-night conversation, every road trip, every shared dream. I kept asking myself where it had gone so wrong. How could someone who once said she couldn't imagine her life without me suddenly say she needed space? I pulled into my driveway and sat in silence, the engine ticking as it cooled. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, hollow, stunned by the betrayal. But the more I sat, the more clarity settled in. I'd done everything I could. I had shown up for her in every way that mattered. I had given her my time, my energy, my heart. And if that still wasn't enough, if she could be swayed by the whispers of someone who barely knew me, then maybe it was time I stopped fighting for someone who wasn't willing to fight for me. That night, I took the ring box and placed it in the back of a drawer, not out of anger, but because it no longer belonged to her. It belonged to someone who would truly see me. I left the ring on the counter, not as a memory of her, but as a symbol of what I truly deserved. A partner who valued me, who stood by me, who wouldn't abandon everything we built at the first sign of confusion or doubt. Someone who believed in us, not someone who tossed our history aside like it meant nothing. I needed to clear my head, so I did what most people do when they're spiraling, turned to my phone for distraction. Bad move. I opened Instagram, expecting mindless scrolling through food pictures, vacation photos, and the usual memes. But instead, the very first thing staring back at me was Liz's story. It was a party scene, nothing outrageous at first, people laughing, dancing, drinks in hand, typical Friday night stuff. But then I saw her. Amelia. She was there, in the middle of it all, hanging off some guy like they'd been together for months. His arm was slung casually around her waist, pulling her close as she leaned into him, giggling, clearly intoxicated, and acting like she hadn't just hours earlier said she needed space to figure things out. My stomach dropped. I stared at the video, frozen, hoping, praying I had seen it wrong. But there she was, looking right at home in someone else's arms. And then something else hit me like a sucker punch. I had been tagged in the story. But not in a way that anyone else would see. Liz had used that sneaky Instagram feature where only the tagged person can view it. She made sure I saw it, no one else. It was personal, targeted. And it worked. For several minutes I just sat there, staring at the screen. The disbelief turned into fury, hot, blinding, and overwhelming. Not just because Amelia was out with another guy so soon, but because the entire betrayal had Liz's fingerprints all over it. The same Liz who'd been whispering doubts into Amelia's ear, criticizing my every move, was now orchestrating this public spectacle for my private humiliation. I shut the app and tossed my phone on the couch. I couldn't even process what I'd seen. Part of me wanted to call Amelia on the spot and demand answers, but the rational part of me stopped that impulse cold. She'd made her choice, and now I had visual confirmation of what that choice looked like. Hours passed. I stayed up, sitting in silence, until my phone lit up again, her name flashing on the screen. I ignored it. She called again, then again. By the fifth call I gave in, not out of hope, but out of morbid curiosity. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice as neutral and cold as I could. "Babe, please let me explain," she cried. Her voice was trembling, almost hysterical. I said nothing, let her speak. "I didn't know Liz was going to post that," she sobbed. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." I laughed bitterly. "A mistake? You hooking up with a random guy after breaking up with me isn't a mistake, Amelia. That's a choice. A very specific, very deliberate choice." "It wasn't like that," she pleaded. "I was drunk. Liz introduced me to him. I didn't even know what was happening until—" "Until what?" I cut in. "Until Liz decided to broadcast it to me? You expect me to believe you had no idea what you were doing?" "She manipulated me," Amelia said, voice cracking. That line sent me over the edge. "You want to blame Liz now? Go ahead. But you're the one who let her manipulate you. You let her into our relationship. You fed her opinions. You made her your sounding board. And then you wrapped yourself around some stranger to figure things out? No, Amelia. That's not on Liz. That's on you." Silence. I thought maybe she'd hung up, but then I heard a quiet, broken, "I'm sorry, I was stupid, I didn't." I cut her off. "Don't apologize. You don't get to say sorry after you made your decision. You don't get to cry and play the victim now." I ended the call, blocked her number. I didn't want to hear another excuse, not another fake apology. Every time I thought about the sound of her voice, the way she tried to flip the script, it made my skin crawl. I couldn't even be mad at the guy in the video. He didn't know me. He didn't owe me anything. But Amelia? She owed me everything, at least the truth, at least a shred of decency. That moment, the one where I saw her with someone else, was the final nail in the coffin. The next morning, my phone buzzed non-stop. Messages, missed calls, a flood of notifications from our mutual friends. I don't know if Amelia told them what happened or if Liz's story had made the rounds. I didn't care. I wasn't in the mood to explain myself or rehash it for anyone's entertainment. I sent a single message to a handful of close friends. "I'm fine, I just need some time." That was all. It wasn't my job to make everyone comfortable or offer explanations. I was done putting other people's emotions ahead of my own. I was tired, emotionally gutted, and ready to focus on moving forward. Have any of you ever been through something like this, where you replay every conversation, every warning sign, and wonder if you should have done something different? Sometimes I ask myself if I was too harsh, but then I remember how calculated it all felt. Amelia let Liz into our relationship. She let her shape the way she saw me, us, everything we had. And when it came time to choose, she didn't choose me. What hurt the most wasn't just a betrayal. It was the realization that somewhere along the way she stopped being on my side. It wasn't about one party or one night. It was the slow erosion of trust, the gradual replacement of our shared understanding with outside influence and quiet resentment. It was the fact that someone else could have so much sway over the person I thought knew me best. And maybe that's what love is at its core, a fragile agreement, a mutual belief in each other, nurtured day by day, tested constantly by the world. When that belief fades even a little, it all starts to crack. I spent that weekend doing everything I could to reclaim myself. I threw myself into work, wrenched open pipes, repaired broken valves, and handled emergency calls like a machine. I told myself I was fine, that I needed her, that what I really needed was to rebuild the life I'd started creating long before she came in. On Sunday night, I went to the gym, pounded the treadmill until my legs burned, then hit the weights like I was trying to exorcise every ghost in my mind. The anger helped, so did the exhaustion, but what helped most of all was the clarity that followed. I began making lists, not of regrets, but of goals. Business goals, personal goals, mental health goals. I contacted a few mentors in my field, set up consultations to finally open that second location I'd always dreamed about. I signed up for a business course not because of what Liz or Amelia said, but because I wanted it for me. I wanted to grow. I called my mom, spent an hour on the phone just listening to her talk about her garden and how the tomatoes were finally coming in. I visited my dad's grave, told him everything, told him I was okay, that I'd made it through something ugly but still standing. That week, I started writing again, something I hadn't done since high school. I didn't care if it was good or if anyone would read it, I just needed to let it out. All the pain, all the confusion, all the moments I kept replaying in my head. It was like unclogging a pipe that had been jammed for years. Every word that hit the page felt like a release. By Friday, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from understanding, from knowing that I'd given my best, and from finally accepting that it hadn't been enough for her. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it was never about being enough for someone else. Maybe the real victory was becoming enough for myself. I don't know what Amelia's doing now, I haven't checked, and I don't care. Let Liz keep posting her curated highlights and passive-aggressive jabs. Let Amelia figure out what space really means. As for me, I'm finally breathing again. And someday, I'll meet someone who doesn't need convincing, who sees me, truly sees me, and never doubts the man I am or the life I'm building. Until then, I'm just going to keep showing up for myself. Every single day. He was powerless in this situation. And Liz? How do people like her even exist? Who goes out of their way to wreck someone's life just for entertainment? I honestly don't know what my next step should be. Part of me thinks the only real way to protect my peace is to cut them both off entirely, just erase the noise and rebuild quietly. Is that cold, or is that just what happens when people finally show you who they are? I'd actually love to hear what you all think, and I promise, I'll keep you posted if anything else happens. Though I was hoping nothing would. First, let me say thank you for all the advice, the messages, and even the dark humor on my last post. One of you said, "Dude, Liz sounds like she's auditioning for America's Worst Coworkers," and I genuinely laughed harder than I had in weeks. You helped me feel sane again, validated my anger, so thank you. Sorry it's taken me a while to come back and update you. Life's been a lot. Between work, processing everything that happened with Amelia, and some unexpected health stuff, I've been stretched way too thin. But I'm here now, so let's unpack everything. Amelia didn't fade into the background quietly. In the weeks following our breakup, she started reaching out again. At first, it was a few texts, apologies, long-winded messages trying to explain how confused she'd been, how she didn't know what she was doing, how she wanted to talk. I ignored them, but she was persistent. Eventually, I caved and sent her a short, firm response. "Amelia, I've said all I needed to. You made your choice. I'm moving on. Please respect that." That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. She began liking my old photos on Instagram, leaving comments like "miss this day," the kind of stuff that was clearly meant to get a reaction. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I'd already wasted enough energy on someone who made it very clear I wasn't her priority. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had any access to me. But just when I thought the drama was over, life threw another curveball. Roughly 2 weeks ago, I started feeling off, constant fatigue, dizziness that wouldn't go away. I figured it was stress, Amelia, Liz, the emotional weight of everything. But when I almost blacked out at work, I knew it was something more serious. I went in for tests. Long story short, I needed surgery. Nothing major or life-threatening, thankfully, but still enough to knock me flat for a while. The support I got during that time was amazing. My friends and family were incredible. The guys who worked for me stepped up in a big way, taking on extra jobs so I wouldn't have to worry about the business during recovery. The surgery itself went fine. I came out groggy but stable. That's when things got weird again. I opened my eyes in the recovery room, still foggy from anesthesia, and saw someone sitting by my bed. At first, I thought it was my sister, or maybe one of my buddies, but no. Let me paint this picture for you. I'm lying there, doped up in a scratchy hospital gown, and Liz is seated beside me like she's my damn girlfriend. She's leaning forward, all concerned and wide-eyed, acting like we've been best friends for years. "Oh my God, I'm so glad you're okay," she said, reaching for my hand like we were some kind of couple. I was too out of it to pull away. I barely managed to ask, "What are you doing here?" "I heard you were in the hospital," she said. "I had to come check on you." Had to. Lizzie, the same woman who undermined my relationship, fed my girlfriend lies, and practically orchestrated our breakup, was now sitting at my bedside acting like Florence Nightingale. I was too loopy to argue, but every sentence she said rang in my ears like a twisted melody. She started going on about Amelia. "I feel terrible about what happened," she said. "You didn't deserve any of that. You're such a good guy." She didn't know what she had. I could see it even then. She was rewriting history. trying to paint herself as the voice of reason, the supportive friend who'd always been rooting for me. At one point she even laced her fingers through mine. I didn't squeeze back. I didn't even blink. But I could feel the shift. Everything started clicking. Liz hadn't just been a bad friend or an annoying presence. She'd been engineering the entire collapse. The snide comments, the doubts, the well-timed critiques, none of it had been random. It was a slow, calculated dismantling of my relationship disguised as friendly concern. And now that Amelia was out of the picture, Liz saw an opening. She wasn't at that hospital because she cared. She was there because she thought I might be vulnerable enough to let her in. I let Liz talk while I lay there, still too exhausted to process everything she was saying. Her voice was syrupy sweet, her words carefully chosen, like someone rehearsing lines from a bad romance script. "You've always deserved better," she cooed. "I could see how hard you worked, how much you loved her." She didn't see that, but I did. It hit me like a slap in the face. This wasn't a spontaneous visit. This was a calculated move. She wasn't showing up out of guilt. She was auditioning for a role she'd been plotting to take over since the beginning. Liz had positioned herself to be the shoulder to cry on, the friend who understood all so she could slide into a spot Amelia hadn't even vacated yet. It was nauseating. I didn't say much that afternoon, not because I agreed with her or felt any warmth, but because I knew that engaging with Liz would only invite more manipulation. The less I gave her to work with, the better. Eventually, a nurse came in, and I asked for privacy. Liz left reluctantly, but not before squeezing my hand one last time and whispering, "Call me if you need anything, okay?" The moment she left the room, I felt like I could breathe again. That night, lying in my hospital bed alone, I replayed everything. The breakup, the betrayal, the party video, and now Liz's bizarre attempt to rewrite the entire story, like she'd always been the good guy. And for the first time in a while, I felt something other than anger or hurt. I felt clear. This wasn't just about Amelia anymore. This was about reclaiming my boundaries, about recognizing toxicity and removing it before it could grow roots again. Liz wasn't a villain in some dramatic movie. She was a real person who had caused real damage, and if I didn't stop her now, she'd keep hurting people the way she hurt us. The next morning, I had a long talk with one of the hospital's social workers. Told them everything, not in full detail but enough to get the message across. I didn't want Liz anywhere near me during the rest of my stay. They flagged her from visitation, and I had my phone settings changed to filter out her calls and messages. I took back control. When I was discharged, my friends helped me get settled at home. One of my coworkers dropped off groceries. My sister came by to cook dinner and make me laugh with old stories. Real people, honest people, people who wanted nothing from me but my well-being. That first weekend back, I started going through my phone and cleaning house. Deleted old texts, blocked numbers, archived photos I didn't want to see anymore. I even set up new privacy settings on social media. It felt like clearing out the emotional clutter in my brain. Every tap on the screen was like a weight being lifted. Amelia tried reaching out one more time. It was a short email this time, no emotional pleas, no excuses, just a quiet acknowledgement that she had hurt me and a note saying she hoped I found happiness. I didn't respond. Not because I hated her, but because I had finally moved beyond needing her to explain or apologize. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means letting go without needing anything more. As for Liz, I haven't heard from her since the hospital, and I hope I never do. People like her thrive on chaos, on the illusion of control. But I've seen past the act now. I know exactly who she is, and more importantly, I know who I am. I'm the guy who built something from scratch, who loved deeply, who gave his all, and who walked away when he realized he deserved more. I'm not bitter, I'm not broken, I'm rebuilding. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: healing isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's cleaning your house, going for a walk, calling an old friend. It's saying no more and meaning it. It's standing in the wreckage and choosing to start over, brick by brick. So, that's where I am now. Still healing, still building, but stronger than I was before. And if Liz or anyone else ever tries to write a different version of this story, they'll find out real fast that I've already reclaimed the pen. I have a plan for Liz. I'm not going to say too much right now because I want to make sure it plays out exactly how I envision it. Just know that once I'm fully recovered, she's going to learn what it feels like to be outplayed. So stay tuned. I'll update you when the time is right. Thanks again for all the support. Your advice has been a huge help, and honestly, reading your comments has kept me sane through all this. I'll be back soon with another update. Until then, wish me a speedy recovery. First of all, wow, the response to my last post was insane. I didn't expect so many of you to get invested in this whole situation, but here we are. Thank you for the advice, support, and hilarious comments. I saw someone say, Liz sounds like the type of person who'd fake being nice to adopt a cat just to post about it on Instagram, and I couldn't agree more. You guys really get me. I know a lot of you wanted to know what my plan was, so buckle up. Things played out almost exactly how I hoped, and let me just say, it was satisfying. After I was discharged from the hospital and started feeling better, Liz didn't waste any time. She texted me almost every day, starting with these super casual just checking in messages. Stuff like, hey, hope you're feeling okay, or let me know if you need anything, I'm here for you. At first I ignored her. I wasn't stupid, I knew exactly what she was doing. But after a while, I realized that playing along might actually work in my favor. So I started replying. Not too much, just enough to keep her on the hook. A simple, thanks for checking in. I'm doing all right, appreciate it. Recovery's been slow, but I'm getting there. Liz ate it up. Her texts got longer and more personal, filled with things like, you're such a strong person, and I don't know how Amelia ever let you go. She started dropping hints, subtle at first, compliments, memories, a casserole picture. I'd love to bring this over if you're up for company. I declined, but it was obvious what she was angling for. About 2 weeks post-hospital, she called me out of the blue. She said she'd been thinking about me, wanted to hear my voice. She laid it on thick, talking about how worried she'd been, how she'd prayed for me. Thanks, Liz, I said, keeping my tone steady. That means a lot. Then she said it. I feel like this whole thing has brought us closer, like it's made me realize how much I care about you. I almost laughed. She didn't care. She cared about winning. But instead of calling her out, I played along. Yeah, I guess it has, I said. And just like that, Liz went full throttle. She started texting me constantly, calling me babe in messages, suggesting we hang out, complimenting me, praising me, spinning this fantasy like we were some destined couple. The thing about Liz is, she's predictable. She thought she was being subtle, playing some long game, but everything she did only confirmed how selfish she really was. So I let her think she was winning. I started texting her back more often, dropped a few compliments of my own, even agreed to meet up. When we finally hung out, Liz was all over me. She kept brushing my arm, giggling at everything I said, talking about how important honesty and loyalty were to her. It was almost comical, but I stayed in character. She leaned in closer, and yeah, we hooked up. Not my proudest moment, but it was part of the plan. The next morning, I didn't text her, or the next day, or the one after that. Total silence. Liz started blowing up my phone. Messages like, hey, everything okay? And did I do something wrong? Turned into, please call me. And eventually, can we talk? I'm worried. She left voicemails, sent Instagram DMs. Within a week, I had a full-blown collection of desperate messages. And that's when I made my move. I screenshotted everything, every text, every voicemail transcript. Her calling me babe, crying on the phone, asking for a second chance. I sent all of it to Amelia. No caption, no explanation, just the receipts. Then I blocked them both. Liz had underestimated me. She thought I was still wounded, still soft, still figuring out how to navigate life post-breakup. What she didn't realize is that while I was recovering physically, I was sharpening my perspective emotionally. I had grown tired of being the one people thought they could use, discard, or manipulate. I wasn't about to sit back and play the fool either. When I sent those screenshots to Amelia, I didn't do it hoping for some big reaction. I didn't even expect a reply. What I needed was for her to see the truth, unfiltered, no interpretation, just Liz, in her own words, exposing her intentions for everyone to see. Amelia didn't respond right away. In fact, it was almost a full day before I heard anything. When she finally did message me, it was short and to the point. Thank you for showing me. I was wrong. That was it. No apology for the breakup, no attempt to rekindle things, just a quiet, humbled acknowledgement that she'd finally seen through the lies. That one message told me everything I needed to know. Liz had poisoned her perspective for months, twisting the narrative, undermining every moment of our relationship with suspicion and doubt. I didn't need Amelia to grovel. I didn't need her to regret losing me. I just needed her to understand that I hadn't been the villain in our story, that the version of me Liz painted was never real. In the days that followed, I noticed Liz stopped trying to contact me. Maybe she realized I'd pulled the plug completely, or maybe Amelia confronted her and she finally felt the sting of being exposed. Either way, her silence was louder than any excuse she could have thrown at me. What amazed me most wasn't how easy it had been to bait her. It was how ready she was to fall into her own trap. She had spent so long plotting, manipulating, strategizing every move, but at the end of the day, she couldn't resist the chance to win, to prove to herself that she could have me if she wanted to. That desperation, that need for validation, is what gave her away. People like Liz often believe they're the smartest ones in the room, that they're always 3 steps ahead, but when the truth finally catches up to them, it's not some dramatic collapse. It's quiet, it's subtle. It's the slow, creeping realization that they played themselves. And I didn't need to scream or shout or get revenge in some flashy way. I just needed to hold up a mirror. Since then, life's been calmer. I've focused on rebuilding physically, emotionally, mentally. My business is back on track, my health is improving, and for the first time in a long while, I'm starting to feel like myself again. Not the version of me who was always giving, always trying to prove his worth, but the version who knows he doesn't have to. I've learned a lot from this entire experience, about trust, about boundaries, and about resilience. There was a time I thought Amelia and I would be forever, that our shared history would anchor us through anything. But no amount of time can survive the erosion caused by doubt and manipulation. And Liz? She'll move on, I'm sure. She'll find someone else to play her games with. But next time, maybe that person won't be as blind to the signs. Maybe they'll recognize the red flags before they start waving. Or maybe they won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Some of you might be wondering if I regret hooking up with Liz to expose her. I've asked myself that too. I'm not proud of the tactic, but I am proud of the outcome. Because for once, I didn't sit back and let things fall apart around me. I showed the truth, not just to Amelia, but to myself. Because in the end, closure isn't about getting the last word. It's about knowing you walked away with your integrity intact while the people who tried to tear you down are left standing in the mess they created. So that's the update. That's the move I'd planned. And yes, thanks again for sticking with me. Your support, your stories, your encouragement, it's been more healing than you could possibly know. I'll keep moving forward, I'll keep building, and I'll keep sharing if you'll keep listening. And to Liz, if you ever stumble across this, consider this your final curtain call. Exit stage left. Alone. But I wanted Amelia to see what she had thrown our relationship away for, and honestly, blocking Liz felt incredible. I felt like I was in control again, like I wasn't just reacting to the chaos she caused. Now, I was the one sitting back and watching the fallout unfold. Liz wanted control, but instead, I turned the tables. I flipped the narrative and showed them what happens when you mess with someone who finally has nothing left to lose. Amelia and Liz, they now had their own reckoning to deal with. But me? I was done. Done playing their games, done entertaining their drama. And trust me, this isn't the last you'll hear from me. Let me fully recover, let them stew in the mess they made, and I'll feed you the next update when the time is right. I promised I'd keep you all in the loop, and things escalated faster than I ever could have imagined. Apparently, my little move of sending all of Liz's desperate, manipulative messages to Amelia set off a chain reaction I couldn't have scripted better if I tried. Word got back to me through the grapevine, mostly from mutual friends and people who still worked with them. Amelia didn't take kindly to discovering that her so-called friend had been scheming behind her back for months. She confronted Liz at work, and from what I heard, it was like striking a match near a gas leak. Instant explosion. Amelia demanded answers, asking Liz point-blank why she'd tried to sabotage our relationship, only to swoop in like some twisted hero afterward. Liz, in true Liz fashion, tried to play innocent. Claimed I was the one who came onto her, that Amelia was being paranoid, that she was just being supportive. But Amelia wasn't having any of it. Their shouting match was so loud that their manager had to step in. But the real chaos happened when Amelia called Liz out in front of everyone, in front of their entire team, accused her of being manipulative, of driving a wedge between us, of trying to ruin her life just so she could get a taste of mine. Liz didn't take it well. She fired back, and before anyone could defuse the situation, it got physical. I don't know exactly who threw the first punch. Some say Amelia pushed Liz, others say Liz slapped Amelia, but it ended with security being called. Both of them were escorted out of the building, and within a few days, both were officially fired. No severance, no goodbye party, just a messy end to their messy story. I didn't feel bad, not for either of them. Liz got exactly what she had coming, and Amelia, well, she wasn't exactly innocent either. She let Liz creep into our lives and plant doubts where trust used to live. She let our relationship deteriorate based on gossip and manipulation, and by the time she realized the truth, it was already too late. What's next for them? Honestly, I don't care. I'm staying far, far away from that circus. I've finally found peace, and I'm not giving it up just because two people can't clean up the mess they made. But of course, people like Liz and Amelia don't just go quietly. About a week after they both lost their jobs, Amelia showed up at my door. No text, no call, just a knock and a sad face. Her eyes were puffy, clearly from crying. Her hair was tied back in a lazy bun like she hadn't even tried to look presentable. She looked like someone who had been through it, and maybe she had. She didn't waste time. Liz planted all those doubts, she said, voice shaking. She made me think you weren't good enough, that you were holding me back. But it was all her. I see that now. Please, let's fix this. I just stood there and let her talk. I wasn't angry, I wasn't bitter, I was just done. When she finally stopped, I took a breath and said, Amelia, I gave you everything. I stood by you when you chased your dreams. I paid your rent, drove for hours just to see you, and believed in you more than you believed in yourself. And you let someone like Liz convince you I wasn't enough. Now you want to come back? She tried to cut in, but I shook my head. I can't do this anymore. I've moved on. She begged, she cried, she asked if we could just talk, but I didn't budge. I wished her the best, stepped back, and gently closed the door. I thought that would be the end of it. But as if on cue, Liz tried her luck the next day. Sent me a long message from a random number saying how sorry she was, how she made mistakes, how she was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. I ignored it, so naturally she showed up in person. All smiles, fake sweetness dripping from her voice. I know I messed up, she said, stepping way too close to my door. But I know you care about me. We could make this work. I see that now. I didn't even let her finish. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, you both made your choices, now live with them. Then I turned around, walked back inside, and shut the door in her face. That was the last time I saw either of them. Since then, life has been peaceful. My business is thriving. I've expanded, hired more people, and have taken on bigger contracts than ever before. My clients are happy, my team is solid, and I'm finally doing work I'm proud of without distraction. I've been spending more time with my friends too, real friends, the kind who don't disappear when things get hard. And yes, I've started dating again. She's amazing, grounded, kind. She laughs at my dumb jokes, listens when I talk about my day, and makes me feel valued not for my bank account or career but for who I am. She doesn't care that I run a plumbing business instead of working in some high-rise office building. She thinks it's cool that I build something with my own two hands, that I take pride in fixing things, solving problems, and helping people. And for the first time in years, I feel like I'm enough. As for Amelia and Liz, last I heard, they're still unemployed and blaming each other for everything. Mutual friends say they barely speak now, and when they do, it's just to trade insults or rehash what went wrong. It's like watching two people burn down a house they built just to see who can blame the other faster. And honestly, I'm not mad about it. If anything, it's poetic. They tore each other apart trying to take me down, and I walked away without a scratch. All I did was tell the truth and let their own actions speak for themselves. The biggest lesson I've learned from all of this: watch who your partner keeps close. Sometimes, it's not the person you're with who causes the pain, it's the people whispering in their ear. People like Liz can do more damage than you think, and by the time you realize it, it might already be too late. So, to anyone listening who's been through something like this, don't settle. Don't ignore red flags. And most importantly, don't let someone else's insecurities define your worth. You deserve someone who sees you, all of you, and loves you, not in spite of your life, but because of it. Life is good now, and I plan to keep it that way.